Picture this. You are a 12-year-old boy in Athens in the year 425 BC. The morning sun casts long shadows across the marble columns of the gymnasium as you arrive for your daily exercises. Your father, a wealthy merchant, has enrolled you in the finest educational institution in the city. You carry your writing, tablet, and stylus, eager to learn from the greatest minds of your generation. The older boys nod respectfully as you pass, and you feel proud to be among the chosen few who receive such privileged education. But something feels different today. The gymnasium trainer, Cleomenes, watches you with an intensity that makes your skin crawl. The philosopher Demetrius, whom everyone reveres for his wisdom about virtue and justice, approaches you with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Other boys your age seem nervous, whispering among themselves before falling silent when adults draw near. You notice how some of the older students move carefully, as if their bodies ache, and how they never quite meet the gaze of their favorite teachers. What you don't know is that your name was discussed in detail at a private symposium 3 nights ago. Wealthy men, respected citizens, philosophers, and politicians debated your qualities like merchants evaluating livestock. They noted your smooth skin, your quick mind, your family's social standing. They discussed your potential for instruction, not in mathematics or rhetoric, but in submission and service to their desires. You have been selected not just for education, but for systematic grooming and intimate exploitation that Athenian society considers not only normal, but beneficial to your development as a citizen. By sunset, the boy who dreamed of becoming a great orator will begin a nightmare that could last for years. The child who trusted his teachers and respected his elders will learn that in ancient Greek society, boys like you existed primarily to satisfy the appetites of powerful men. This was not hidden scandal or whispered perversion. This was erastes and eromenos, the mentor-student relationship that philosophers praised as the highest form of love and education. Tonight, we follow your journey into a system of institutionalized child abuse that operated openly for centuries, sanctioned by law, celebrated in poetry, and defended by the greatest minds of the ancient world. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please, comment below to let me know where you are listening from. To understand what happened to boys like you, we must first grasp the staggering scope of this system. In Athens alone, with a population of roughly 250,000, an estimated 15,000 boys between the ages of 12 and 18 were involved in these relationships at any given time. Across the Greek world, spanning hundreds of city-states and colonies from Spain to the Black Sea, the number reaches into the hundreds of thousands. This practice flourished for over 8 centuries, from the 8th century BC to the 4th century AD, consuming generation after generation of young lives. The Greeks didn't hide this system or feel shame about it. They celebrated it in their highest art forms. Vase paintings depicting older men pursuing young boys adorned the homes of the wealthy. Poets like Theognis wrote detailed instructions for selecting and training boy companions. Philosophers like Plato dedicated entire dialogues to defending these relationships as essential for moral and intellectual development. What modern society recognizes as systematic child exploitation, the Greeks elevated to a sacred institution central to their civilization. The economic drivers were as calculating as they were cruel. Wealthy older men, called erastes or lovers, gained social prestige by publicly courting beautiful boys from good families. The boys, called eromenos or beloved, provided intimate services in exchange for education, protection, and social advancement. Families actively participated, seeing these relationships as opportunities for their sons to gain powerful patrons who could advance their careers. Poor families sometimes sold their sons outright to wealthy men seeking long-term companions. But these numbers only hint at the human cost. Modern archaeological evidence reveals the physical toll this system took on its victims. Skeletal remains of young males from this period show unusually high rates of pelvic injuries, spinal damage, and stress fractures consistent with repeated physical trauma. Medical papyri describe treatments for what physicians called the common ailments of gymnasium boys, including tears, infections, and internal injuries that required ongoing care. The silence in historical records about these medical realities speaks volumes about how completely society normalized the suffering of children. The selection process began long before boys understood what was happening to them. Starting around age 10, boys from wealthy families attended gymnasia where they exercised naked under the supervision of adult trainers. These institutions served as hunting grounds for potential Erastes, who would observe boys during their athletic activities, evaluating their physical development, beauty, and potential for compliance. The most attractive boys found themselves receiving special attention, gifts, and invitations that their families encouraged them to accept. Your father received the first approach last month, though he didn't tell you about it. Cleomenes, the trainer, mentioned casually that several prominent citizens had noticed your athletic ability and intellectual promise. He suggested that receiving guidance from an experienced mentor could open doors for your future career. Your father, ambitious for your advancement and honored by the attention, gave his enthusiastic consent. You became available for courtship without even knowing you were being offered. The gymnasium, where you spend your days, was designed specifically to facilitate these relationships. The architecture itself served the system's purposes. Private chambers adjoined the main exercise areas where Erastes could meet privately with boys. Bathing facilities provided opportunities for intimate inspection under the guise of cleanliness and health. Even the daily schedule was arranged to create moments of vulnerability, with massage sessions and oil applications that normalized inappropriate touching. The grooming process followed predictable patterns that were so standardized they were described in instructional texts. First came the gift-giving phase, where potential Erastes would present boys with valuable items, exotic foods, or promises of special privileges. These gifts created obligations and marked boys as claimed by particular men. Other potential suitors would recognize these signs and withdraw, leaving the boy isolated with his chosen predator. Demetrius the philosopher begins this process with you today. He approaches after your wrestling lesson, praising your technique and offering to provide additional private instruction. He presents you with a beautiful leather-bound scroll of Homer's poetry, far more valuable than anything your family could afford. When you protest that you cannot accept such an expensive gift, he insists that promising students deserve the finest materials for their education. His hand rests on your shoulder as he speaks, lingering longer than feels comfortable. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and systematic. These men were not crude predators operating in shadows, but educated manipulators who understood how to exploit the natural desires of children for approval, advancement, and belonging. They positioned themselves as mentors and father figures, offering guidance that boys genuinely needed while gradually introducing inappropriate elements that confused and overwhelmed their victims. Ancient texts reveal the calculated nature of this grooming. Philosophical treatises provided detailed instructions on how to gain a boy's trust, how to isolate him from family and friends, and how to gradually escalate physical contact while framing it as educational or affectionate. These weren't the desperate improvisations of individual predators, but refined techniques passed down through generations of abusers and celebrated as sophisticated approaches to youth development. The first boundary violations always came disguised as education or care. During your private lesson with Demetrius, he explains that understanding the human form is essential for appreciating poetry about athletic competition. He has you remove your tunic so he can demonstrate proper muscle development, while reciting verses about heroic warriors. His hands trace the lines of your back and chest as he speaks of strength and beauty, making you feel simultaneously special and deeply uncomfortable. When you express confusion about this teaching method, Demetrius becomes serious and paternal. He explains that you are still young and innocent, unable to understand the sophisticated relationship between physical and spiritual beauty that educated men appreciate. He assures you that these lessons will prepare you for adult responsibilities and citizenship. Your discomfort, he suggests, shows immaturity that he will help you overcome through patient instruction. The isolation phase began immediately after the first inappropriate contact. Demetrius suggests that your regular gymnasium training is insufficient for someone of your potential. He arranges for you to receive private instruction at his home, away from other students who might distract from your specialized education. Your father, grateful for this individual attention from such a respected teacher, readily agrees to the new arrangement. At Demetrius's house, you discover other boys who receive similar special instruction. They range in age from 10 to 16, all beautiful, all from good families, all bearing the same carefully blank expressions you're learning to recognize. They don't speak much among themselves, and when they do, their conversations avoid certain topics entirely. You notice how they flinch when Demetrius touches them casually, how they compete for his approval while simultaneously seeming to dread his attention. The older boys, those who have been in the system for several years, serve as both warnings and models. 16-year-old Alexios was once eager and curious like you, but now moves through lessons with mechanical precision, anticipating Demetrius's desires before they're expressed. His eyes hold depths of knowledge that make you uncomfortable, an understanding of adult realities that seems too heavy for someone so young. When you ask him questions about the lessons, he suggests you focus on pleasing your teacher rather than understanding everything immediately. The escalation always followed the same pattern across different households and relationships. After establishing private access and beginning boundary violations, Erastes would introduce increasingly explicit instruction. This might begin with lessons about anatomy using the boy's own body as a model, progress to demonstrations of affection between mentor and student, and eventually include full, intimate contact framed as advanced education in love and pleasure. Ancient medical texts describe the physical preparation that accompanied this escalation. Boys were given special diets to maintain their attractiveness, oils and perfumes to enhance their appeal, and treatments for injuries that resulted from intimate contact with adult men. Physicians developed specialized instruments and techniques for treating the damage that these relationships inflicted, creating an entire medical specialty around maintaining boys for their Erastes pleasure. Your own introduction to these realities comes during your fourth private lesson. Demetrius explains that understanding love requires practical experience, not just theoretical knowledge. He begins with demonstrations using classical sculptures, pointing out the intimate embraces between gods and mortals that represent divine love. These artistic examples, he explains, show how physical affection between mentor and student reflects cosmic harmony and philosophical truth. When Demetrius suggests that you practice these poses to understand their meaning, your instincts scream danger, but your training in obedience and respect for authority overrides your fear. You allow him to position your body according to the sculptures, feeling his hands linger in places that make you want to run. He speaks continuously during these sessions, filling the silence with philosophical justifications that make your confusion seem like ignorance and your resistance like moral failing. The psychological damage began immediately, but took years to fully manifest. Boys who endured these relationships developed complex trauma responses that ancient sources occasionally acknowledge but never fully address. Some became withdrawn and compliant, learning to anticipate their Erastes desires and provide perfect service to avoid punishment. Others became manipulative and calculating, using their position as a tool for advancement while losing the capacity for genuine intimacy. The most tragic cases were boys who internalized the system's values completely, believing that their worth came entirely from their ability to please older men. These children often sought out new Erastes as they aged out of their original relationships. addicted to the approval and protection that came with intimate service, even as it destroyed their capacity for normal adult relationships. They graduated from victims to perpetrators, continuing cycles of abuse that stretched across generations. Your own psychological conditioning accelerates as weeks pass. Demetrius has convinced you that your family sent you to him because they recognized your special qualities and wanted you to receive the finest possible education. He explains that most boys your age are too crude and simple to appreciate the sophisticated relationship you're developing together. You begin to feel pride in being chosen for this advanced instruction, even as it makes you feel sick and confused. The system included elaborate justifications that helped both perpetrators and victims rationalize what was happening. Philosophers argued that these relationships channeled male energy in ways that strengthened rather than weakened society. Unlike relationships with women, which were seen as purely physical, Erastes Eromenos' bonds supposedly elevated both partners through intellectual and spiritual connection. The older man gained a beautiful companion who inspired him to greater achievements, while the boy received education and protection that prepared him for adult responsibilities. Religious authorities supported these relationships by connecting them to divine examples. Zeus's abduction of Ganymede became a model for how gods chose beautiful mortals for special attention. Military heroes like Achilles and Patroclus were cited as examples of how love between males created unbreakable bonds that strengthened armies. These mythological precedents gave the system divine sanction and made questioning it seem like impiety rather than moral concern. The legal framework protected Erastes while leaving boys completely vulnerable. Laws regulated certain aspects of these relationships, primarily to prevent married men from neglecting their wives, or to ensure that boys from citizen families weren't treated exactly like slaves. But no laws protected boys from intimate abuse itself, which wasn't recognized as harmful or criminal. Instead, regulations focused on maintaining proper forms and procedures that distinguished respectable mentorship from crude exploitation. Court records reveal how thoroughly the legal system served the interests of adult men rather than children. Cases involving disputes between Erastes over the same boy were heard with great seriousness, with judges carefully weighing the competing claims of different suitors. But cases involving boys who complained about their treatment were dismissed as evidence of immaturity or ingratitude. The law assumed that boys couldn't understand their own best interests, and therefore couldn't consent to or refuse relationships that adults deemed beneficial. Your attempts to resist Demetrius's escalating demands are met with sophisticated manipulation that makes you question your own perceptions. When you express discomfort with his touching, he responds with hurt disappointment, suggesting that your reaction shows immaturity and ingratitude for his patient instruction. He reminds you of the gifts he's given, the time he's invested, and the opportunities he's providing for your advancement. Your resistance becomes evidence of your need for more intensive guidance rather than reason to reconsider the relationship. The isolation from family and friends intensifies as your relationship with Demetrius deepens. He explains that most people, including your parents, couldn't understand the sophisticated education you're receiving and might interfere out of ignorance. He arranges for you to spend more time at his house and less with your family, creating practical dependence while cutting off potential sources of support or alternative perspectives on your situation. The peak horror of your experience comes during a symposium at Demetrius's house, where you're displayed alongside other boys for the entertainment of his guests. These men, all respected citizens and intellectuals, view your performance of affection and submission as evidence of proper education and social refinement. They discuss your development with a detached interest of farmers evaluating livestock, praising Demetrius for his skill in training such a responsive student. During this gathering, you realize the full scope of what you've become trapped within. Every adult man present has his own boy or boys, creating a network of abuse that spans the entire social elite. The younger children serve wine and food while enduring casual groping and intimate inspection. The older boys, those nearing the age when they'll graduate from these relationships, move with the hollow efficiency of broken spirits going through familiar motions. The discussion among the men reveals how completely they've divorced this system from any concern for the boys' welfare. They debate techniques for training, compliance, share strategies for managing difficult students, and exchange boys like valuable possessions. One guest admires your appearance and asks Demetrius if you might be available for borrowing during an upcoming festival. Your mentor considers the request seriously, discussing your capabilities and limitations as if you're not sitting beside him listening to every word. As your ordeal continues over months and years, you watch other boys age out of the system and attempt to transition into normal adult lives. Some succeed in building careers and families, though they carry psychological scars that affect every relationship they form. Others become predators themselves, seeking younger partners who remind them of their own lost innocence. Many simply disappear from historical records, their fates unknown, but their suffering undocumented, except in occasional medical texts describing treatments for former Eromenos dealing with ongoing physical and psychological damage. Your own story reaches its conclusion when you finally age beyond the preferred range for Eromenos, somewhere around 16 or 17. Demetrius begins showing interest in younger boys, gradually reducing the time and attention he provides while encouraging you to find appropriate relationships with girls your own age. The transition is presented as natural graduation from one life phase to another, but the abandonment leaves you emotionally devastated and unprepared for normal adult relationships. The systematic nature of this abuse across Greek society created generational trauma that affected entire populations. Boys who were victimized often became fathers who facilitated their own sons' entry into similar relationships, perpetuating cycles of abuse that lasted for centuries. The normalization was so complete that questioning the system was literally unthinkable for most participants, who had been conditioned to see their exploitation as education and their abuse as love. The scale of this tragedy becomes clear when we consider that these practices operated openly across the entire Greek world for over 8 centuries. Conservative estimates suggest that millions of boys endured intimate exploitation that was celebrated as the highest form of education and mentorship. Their individual stories were lost in histories that focused on the achievements of their abusers, the philosophers and politicians and artists who built their careers on foundations of systematic child abuse. Modern parallels to this ancient system exist wherever authority figures gain access to vulnerable children while society looks away. Elite educational institutions, religious organizations, sports programs, and entertainment industries create similar dynamics of power, isolation, and normalization that enable widespread abuse. The same psychological techniques that Greek Erastes used to groom and control boys appear in contemporary cases of institutional child exploitation. We remember boys like you, not as statistics in ancient history, but as individual human beings who deserved protection, love, and the chance to develop without exploitation. Your story, and thousands like it, remind us that behind every civilization's achievements lies a foundation built on human suffering, and that the price of cultural glory is often paid by those who have no choice in the matter. If this glimpse into history's hidden darkness has left you wanting to uncover more buried truths, I've prepared another journey into the shadows of the past that you won't want to miss. Click on the video appearing on your screen now to discover another shocking chapter that history tried to erase. And if you found this exploration as compelling as I did, hit that subscribe button so we can continue peeling back the layers of history together. These forgotten voices deserve to be heard, and there are so many more stories waiting to be told.